Good evening and welcome to A10. I'm Tony Brooks, Deputy Director. We are very pleased that you have chosen to join our conversation today about PBS and the Women and Girls Lead Initiative. It's an inspiring story about the power of public service media at home and around the world. First of all, I'd like to introduce Dr. Lynn Rich, our moderator for today. Dr. Rich is an assistant professor at UCA in the Department of Sociology with research interests including family and gender. Dr. Rich is also a member of the A10 Foundation Board of Directors. Dr. Rich.
Thank you very much.
Next, it's my great pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker for this evening, Paula Kerger, President and Chief Executive Officer of PBS, the nation's largest non-commercial media organization with more than 350 member stations throughout the country, including AETN. Ms. Kerger joined PBS as its sixth president and chief executive in March of 2006. Since her arrival, she has made particularly strong commitments to the arts, news and public affairs, high-quality content for education, diversity, and the use of new technology to bring public media into the lives of all Americans. Ms. Kerger is a member of the Women and Girls Lead Leadership Council, a group of individuals committed to inspiring citizen and leadership action to achieve gender equality around the world. Paula Kerger. We're going to begin this evening with a short video about the Women and Girls Lead Public Media Campaign.
Sometimes, I get picked on at school, but I just tell myself, keep going, there could be more.
When you look into the reflection of your mirror, I want you to think about how you see yourself and not what everybody else thinks about you.
This is the beginning.
We want to participate in politics, to be leaders. We want to be equal.
¿Por qué no están estudiando? ¿Qué es eso?
What Catalina's doing is very important. I mean, you can't walk 2 steps without seeing a pregnant child. It's pretty remarkable.
The shuttle is launching and it shakes and it rattles until the solid rocket boosters come out. I remember having this huge grin on my face because I was doing exactly what I wanted to do.
I was waiting to see if there was another. I hope you will all join me again in welcoming our keynote speaker for this evening, PBS President Paula Kerger.
Thank you. It is truly great to be here tonight to talk about Women and Girls Lead and to talk about the role of women in public media. I have just come from a 2-day symposium in South Carolina on this exact same issue, and it's a great time in media, and it's a great time for women, but there are also challenges ahead. So what I think is going to make this a really wonderful next hour is for me to give some framing remarks and for this really to be a discussion. I know there are a number of students sitting here, and it would be great to talk about what it is that you want to talk about. So I'm going to give a little bit of an overview, then I want to come back and talk about this Women and Girls Lead initiative and explain a bit more about it. And then I think you and I are going to have a conversation, right? So let me first start by giving a few larger thoughts about some of the challenges facing women in society and why I think it's more important than ever to expand the role of women in media, both on screen and behind the scenes. I want to talk about the special role that public broadcasting plays in helping to move more women forward, not only in media, but as you saw a bit in that clip, in society as a whole. And then I have a special challenge for each of you. I'm really proud to say that from the very beginning, from its founding, PBS has strived to use the power of television to present positive images of women. From the moment we went on the air, our primetime schedule has included programs that highlight the significant role of women in the history of the world. Women also have played an important role behind the scenes in public television. I'm talking, of course, about women like Joan Gance Cooney, who believed that television could be used not only as an entertainment tool, but as an education tool as well. And with that belief and vision, produced Sesame Street, sparking a revolution in public television and giving children a new way to learn and inspiring others. Now, for those of you, and as I look around the room, many of you are not quite old enough to remember a world before Sesame Street, but what television broadcasters used to do is they would get someone from the station, usually the weatherman, and he would put on a clown suit, and he would do a little bit of a routine. Sometimes they'd have kids in the studio, and then he'd run cartoons. That was children's television before Sesame Street. And so that gives you an idea of how radical this whole concept of using television as education. Television was often used as a way that people wasted time. But to be able to use the same principles and ideas, frankly, that were used to sell product, to help kids learn basic concepts of letters and numbers and the kinds of education and basic foundational skills that would help them succeed in school is really what she envisioned. But she wasn't the only woman pioneer. There are people like Paula who in the early 70s went to work as a typist at WGBH, which is our PBS station in Boston. She rose through the ranks and today serves as the senior executive producer of Nova, PBS's Peabody Award-winning science series. I've had the opportunity to work with so many talented women. Of course, one can't think of women in public television without thinking of Julia Child, who was, when you think about it, the most unlikely of television stars. She had a strange voice, she had a clumsy style, but she really taught us much more than about the world of French cooking. And actually, again, for those of you who don't remember A World Before Julia Child, really, we didn't know how to master French cuisine until she came on the scene and gently taught us how to put things together. But here's the most important thing I think she taught us. She taught us that it was okay to mess up. All you had to do was pick the chicken up off the floor, hopefully if no one was looking, dust it off a little bit, put it in the pan, and everything was just going to be fine. She really was a great visionary for our industry. And I am actually the second president, a second female president of PBS. But I'll tell you that many of the colleagues on my executive team are also women. Our chief financial officer is a woman, our general counsel is a woman. The programming for PBS, both kids and general audience, are each one run by women. And when I look across public media, there are lots of women that are engaged in our work. The head of the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, which is the government agency that oversees public broadcasting, is run by Pat Harrison, a woman. She's actually the person that spearheaded this Women and Girls Lead project, which is, in fact, a 3-year initiative. And the whole idea was to take a range of programs that were being produced about the state of women around the world, and rather than have them broadcast as separate standalone type of events, really try to put a bright light and in some respects you might say a bow around all of it, so that the whole really felt so much larger than each one of the individual pieces. And the thing about Women and Girls Lead that's really exciting and interesting, at least to me, is that each one of these stories is very compelling. And I think really tells us so much about not only the challenges that women face, but also really the fortitude and strength and power that we have. And so by having, instead of individual films that sort of come and go, but a collection of 50 films, it really, I think, has gone a long way to not only raise the visibility for all of the films, but also has really created a forum and a platform for conversation. So how this project started is, was really, the idea was it was going to be a 3-year project. And in public broadcasting, we do a lot of engagement type of activities, but usually we do it for a very fixed period of time. So we'll do, we have a big project coming up this spring on cancer. So during that broadcast, we'll do some very specific types of outreach projects in communities. But the idea of taking 3 years to really focus on a subject, I think gave a lot of us a real opportunity to think a little larger about what this initiative could be. The other thing that we did is we looked at a few anchor projects that we could put throughout the 3 years that would also then give a little bit more structure for what it was that we were attempting to achieve. So the very first year, we took a series of films that were produced, that were executive produced by the wonderful documentary filmmaker Abigail Disney. And the series was called Women, War, and Peace. You know, oftentimes stories of war really focus on combat. And oftentimes women are left out. And women are obviously impacted significantly by combat. And there are powerful stories of not only women who are engaged in fighting on behalf of their countries, but also women who have been powerful forces in terms of peace. And so that was the first big project for the first year. The second year, we had a great film that came to us from Nicholas Kristof and Sherwood Dunn, based on their novel, Half the Sky, that really looked at the state of women around the world and looked at issues like sex trafficking. And it was hugely powerful. When we broadcast the film trended on Twitter. In fact, it was the #1 trending project on Twitter. And really began a huge conversation that frankly has continued since about trafficking, both internationally as well as locally, and I'll come back to that in a second. The third year, we did a project called Kind-Hearted Woman. It was done actually this time by a male filmmaker, Donald Sutherland, and the focus of the film was on domestic violence. It was an extraordinary film that that I know created conversation around the country. This particular story was set in a Native American community, and the challenges that women in that community specifically faced were quite significant. And so those were the 3 anchor projects for the 3 years. We're now in year 4. And right now, A Path Appears, which also came to us from Nick Kristof and Sherwood Dunn, was a continuation of the story that they started in Half the Sky. A Path Appears looks at issues of trafficking, looks at issues of women in poverty, and it looks at issues of domestic violence. And this series not only looks at women internationally, but it looks at very powerful stories here in the United States. And if you have been on Twitter and have been following the conversation around A Path Appears, you'll realize that it has truly struck a chord. So a lot of media organizations are trying to figure out how to weave social media into the conversations about work, mostly for marketing and promotion purposes. I can tell you that the conversations on Twitter are about people who are so moved by this documentary that they want to do something and they want to be engaged. And that really is the power of storytelling, is to take important issues and to truly bring them to a much wider audience. And so we're very excited, and I think the model of this project that we've done specifically focused on women is really something that we should look at to the future as we look at other issues that we want to give this kind of intensive treatment. But I can tell you that this Women and Girls Lead, which now in its 4th year of a 3-year project seems to be on a trajectory of its own. And as we look at more and more talented filmmakers coming forward with great and powerful stories, I think that this is going to be an ongoing strand of focus for us as we look forward. So I've talked a little bit about how we're thinking about documentary film for an adult audience. Let me talk for a couple minutes about what we do for our youngest audiences. So we have a very large audience of people that watch us in prime time. We're the 5th largest. We have the 5th largest audience of all broadcasters in cable. So a lot of people come to us each and every night, not just for Downton Abbey, but for other programs as well. But where we also have a very significant audience is for our youngest citizens, viewers under the age of 5. And for us, over the years, we have built on Joan Cooney's legacy of great programming that is safe and entertaining, of course, but is also impactful and really provides every child with the skills that they need to be successful, hopefully when they enter school, as well as for life. We recognize that there are lots of children in this country who will never see the inside of a pre-K classroom. And we also know that there are lots of homes in this country where there may not be computers or books, but there certainly is television, and in many homes there are smartphones. And so if we can use those 2 devices as a way to really connect to viewers, then, and particularly the littlest ones, we know that we can have impact, because we now have more than 40 years of research that shows that the work that we do is in fact giving kids basic skills. So as we focused on issues like literacy and STEM and social emotional skills, those skills like, how to pay attention and how to deal with disappointment and all of those things that frankly are really helpful for adults as well. We also realized that we needed to think about what images children were seeing. So we contacted Gina Davis, who you saw her picture in the clip that just showed. She has a Gina Davis Institute, which she created a few years ago after she had the experience of watching television with her young daughter. Now, she was watching G-rated programs, and what she realized as she was watching is that most of the girls that were depicted on television and actually also in film were either hypersexualized or trivialized in some way. They were silly, they were goofy, they were princesses, nothing wrong with being a princess, but that their roles were very narrowly defined. And as she drilled down a little bit more and talked to people that were creating content for kids, she heard that there was a commonly accepted belief that little boys will watch shows about little boys and are not interested in watching shows about little girls. Now, if you have children, you know that's ridiculous. Kids, especially when they're really young, don't know the difference between little boys and little girls. They like really great stories and they like heroes like all the rest of us. And so we brought her in and had her talk to our filmmakers and really look carefully at the films that we were producing for kids. And we realized that we had good girl characters, but we didn't have as many girl lead characters as we actually had thought. Now, we also have a lot of animated characters, so that gets a little fuzzy. You know, Cat in the Hat is really a guy, you know, and he is a guy, so you can't sort of change that. But we were building new programs, and so we knew that we had an opportunity. And so we started purposely looking for stories and storytellers who would ensure that the characters that we were developing, the heroes, would be girls as well as boys. So the first and most powerful of the girl characters is Word Girl. Now, Word Girl, if you've watched, started as an online digital project and became so popular, it became a weekly show and is now a daily show. Word Girl uses vocabulary as her superpower. And she is smart, she is savvy, and she is every bit a role model for young girls. We then, as we were looking at stereotypes for girls, one of the larger stereotypes is in the area of math, that girls are not good at math. And a lot of times, I think, and probably unwittingly, adult women, this is our problem, will say to young girls, oh, I'm bad at math, and not realize what message that's saying, which is girls can't do math. And so we were creating a new math series, and we purposely built the series where the lead character would be a little girl, Peg. And so if you have young ones in your house, you may know Peg plus Cat. And Peg and Cat go on adventures, and they solve problems that arise, and they use math as their solution. It is a fantastic series. In its first year, won an Emmy Award. And I think that, and guess what? I just talked to someone this afternoon who has a son who said he loves Peg plus Cat. And he doesn't know that Peg is a girl, and he's not supposed to be watching girl shows, right? So I think that it is a complete fallacy that boys do not have interest in great heroes and heroines. And so I think that we are, as we look at our work moving forward, we are very mindful of the characters. We have a new program we launched this year, Odd Squad. Odd Squad is a group of kids who also use the power of math to solve weird events that happen in the world. And the boss of the Odd Squad is a little girl who is tough, and she's also the smallest child in the trio. And it is a fantastic series, and I think, again, purposely built with the idea that girls need to see themselves and their potential reflected in the work that we do. So why is this important? Why should we not just look at the world and just assume that, you know, a lot has changed in the last 10, 20 years? It certainly has. But when you really look at some industries, and let's look at media, because that's what we're talking about right now, and you really start to drill down and figure out actually, you know, who's running all the media organizations, you realize that rather than 50% of the leadership positions in media companies, which is basically how we're represented in a population, it's closer to 15% of the leadership positions in media are held by women. Last year, we announced that Gwen Ifill and Judy Woodruff would become the co-anchors of the NewsHour. As I was making the announcement, someone told me, you know, by the way, this is the first time that two women have ever anchored a national news program. How can that be? How can that be in 2014 when we made the announcement that it was the first time? By the way, the executive producer of the NewsHour is also a woman. So I think that as we look at, you know, sort of where we are, and there are research studies done every year on that sort of track the trajectory of how women in media are employed, both in front of the camera and behind the camera. You can see that there are gains, but they're slow. And women of color, even further behind. Why does it matter? Because if the media is influential, as I think most of us believe, then I think it does matter who is in front of the camera and what images children and others see. But it also matters who's making the decisions, who's deciding what stories are told, whose stories are told, and how they're told. And that's why it really is important that media, and this is one of the principal goals for public media right now, is that we need to be as reflective of the communities we serve. We need to have stabs that look like our communities, and we need to have both people of color and women in significant roles. And so we've started an initiative working with our stations to try to help everyone get to the place where, in fact, we achieve that goal that I've just described. Now, I'm very proud at my own organization that 36% of our team are people of color, and at all levels of the organization, not just entry level. The other thing I'm proud is far more than half of my team are women. And in fact, sometimes at our senior team meetings, I look around the table and I think maybe we need to invite a few more men to the table. But I think that it is important that, that we think about these things. I was we were talking about gaming, and you told me a story about gaming, which I hope when we get into the Q&A you'll bring up, which is about how women are portrayed in video games, and we should talk about that because that's really yet another part of media that we're not as heavily involved in, but I think is one that really deserves not only some discussion and thought, but I think there's a role that we can all play there. But I think that when I just lost my train of thought thinking about the games. I have notes here, but I'm not giving a speech. I think that when we look at the projects that we're producing and we look at new media and digital media, I always thought, because I know in my own organization, this has been an opportunity to bring a lot of younger people. I know the users of this content. So we distribute a lot of work on television. I found my train of thought, in case you were worrying that I'm just vamping. I remembered it really quickly. I know that the work that we produce for television, I know what that audience looks like. I also know what the audience looks like that comes to us in digital. They come to us online, they come to us on iPad, they come to us on all the over-the-tops like Apple TV and Netflix and so forth. They're younger. They also tend to be more diverse. And the people that are helping us develop digital content, particularly the work that we're doing in YouTube and spaces like that, tend to be younger, more diverse. Interesting. I attended a meeting about 2 years ago, year and a half ago, that was given by a major organization in New York that brings together investors and entrepreneurs, people with new ideas, people working in the new media space. This is a total media conference. And it's one of these events you have to get invited to go. And so I was invited, and I went to the Plaza Hotel in New York. And there were hundreds of people, you know, all the bold-faced names that you read about in the media that are all the movers and shakers. And I looked around the room, and I thought to myself, the only women I'm seeing are the women that are handing out the packages behind the desk. This was a year and a half ago. This is a new media symposium where investors, money, is getting paired with people with new ideas trying to launch new ventures. And I commented to a friend of mine who was there who made a joke and said, this was a joke, so when I say it, you know, he said, "What are you talking about, Paula? Jerry Laybourne is here." And laughed. And I said to myself, yeah, I'm sure people in the room will look around and say to themselves, well, there's Jerry Laybourne. She's here. We've got women in the room. It was scandalous. On the stage, when they went through all the presentations, not one woman was on the stage. Not one person of color was on the stage. And there were panel after panel after panel. And I thought, wow, when I think this country has really moved forward, and then you look at something like this, which is a new industry, an emerging industry, you would think that there would be more opportunities for women and for, again, a more diverse group of people. And here you have a replication of what we've been trying to work through now for all these years. So, and by the way, I got an invitation for this year. And they, when you get invitations to, go to conferences and so forth, usually they tell you who some of the lead speakers are. Again, there was not one woman on that list. So what do we do about it? I think that the answer really lies with each and one of us, because this will continue if we allow it to. So for those of us who work in media, it is up to us to bring people in to our organizations, to mentor new talent coming up, to create internships for people to develop skills and ideas and opportunity. But I think we need to do a little more than look in our own organizations and see what else we can do. I think we also need to raise our own voices. And this is where your whole point about the gaming comes into play. So I think it's important to look for opportunities to train girls in building games. I'm involved in some projects. We're doing some game development at PBS, particularly with kids. I think it's really important that we encourage girls to learn coding and the skills that will really get them into the kinds of jobs that are important for the future. But I think we also have to speak up. And I think it's just too easy to continue to buy the games and just say, well, these are really horrible. And I'm not suggesting a massive boycott, but I think that if we see images that reinforce negative stereotypes, it's up to each and every one of us to say no. This is not acceptable. This is not appropriate. I think that our sons and frankly our daughters deserve better. And so I think that for us in public media, what I'm hoping that we can do as part of this is, yes, look for opportunities to bring people to our organization, but also to convene conversations so together as communities we can talk about this, because I think it is profoundly important. When I grew up and was a little girl, some of my earliest memories were watching television. So television really did shape my life. Now, my earliest memory, I'm not as old as I'm going to sound right now. My earliest memory was watching I Love Lucy in reruns. It was great. She was a brilliant woman. But think about what that show was about. She wanted to have a career, but that was stupid. And so she did wacky things, and it never worked out well for her. And but then I also had Mary Tyler Moore, and she was a great inspiration. And I think that as we look forward, I think that there are just many opportunities for us to think about how we can send the message that women are power. I have a little niece, and she said, "Aunt Paula, it's girl power." And she's absolutely right, because I think that when we look together, we can work together. My last story, again, my last old creaky story. I went to business school. I just shared this with some kids at Furman 2 days ago. I went to business school. It was an interesting path. People sometimes ask me, how did I end up in this job? So for all the college students, if you think you have to have your life figured out, don't worry about it. Your path will come. I thought I was the ultimate underachiever in my life because I was in college. I didn't have a clue. I started college thinking I wanted to be a doctor. I hit organic chemistry. I was no longer going to be a doctor. I loved the arts, so I took all kinds of art history and comparative religion and literature classes and loved it and panicked I would never be gainfully employed. I got a degree in business because I thought that would help. At the time I was in business school, I graduated in business school in '79, I had classes where I was the only woman. Maybe there were one or two other women, particularly in fields like banking and economics. Marketing, there were more of us, but in those classes there were very few women. I had a teacher in a money and banking class once when I was trying to ask a question because I was completely lost with what he was talking about, say, "I am not answering your question. You are wasting my time. It is clear you're only here to find a husband." Now, I'm not that old. So this is not that much in our past. And so I tell you all of this because I think that, I don't want you to feel sorry for me or any of that. I just think that, the things that happen in our lives make us stronger. But I also think that those perspectives aren't so much really in the past. So we have to just keep working. It's my little feminist speech. We have to just keep working to make sure that we do have those opportunities. And for those of us who have positions of authority, we need to bring people up with us as we come. So it is not good that any of us are the first woman. We don't want to be the last woman or the only woman. We want to have tons of talented women following behind us and tons of talented men that have the opportunities that they should have so that each and every one of us has the chance to reach our full potential. And if we can do that, then I think we will, in fact, have created the community that we want to live in. And that, at the end of the day, is really what it's all about. So that was a bit of a ramble there, but I hope it did a bit of framing. So we can talk about, you've got questions teed up, so I'll let you get started, but think about what it is that you want to talk about, particularly you all over here. And if there are things that would be helpful to you, I know you're getting credits for being here. So just want to make sure that those are well-earned credits. If there's any areas that you want to talk about media, around the change in media, around other things that I see in terms of the change in women's roles. When I was speaking in front of a group of students last 2 nights ago, some wanted to talk about the role, the images of women in advertising. We talk about whatever you want. But to get us started, why don't you come up?
Well, please join me in thanking Paula Kerger for an excellent talk. She has certainly given us a lot of things to think about. All right. All right, so we're going to open this up for questions, and here's a little bit about how this is going to work out. If you've got a question, if you could just raise your hand. We've got some members here from AETN with microphones, and they will come to, there you go.
There's one here and there's one there.
Right? And they will come to you. So if you could just stand, identify yourself, and ask your question. All right. And I'll tell you, I'm going to get this little party started because she had my wheels turning over here.
Good. I hope I'm turning in a good way.
Absolutely. So while you all are perhaps thinking a little bit about what you'd like to ask, I've also was thinking while Ms. Kerger was talking.
Paula.
Paula was talking. And one of the things that really occurs to me is you use the word girl power. And I think about how girls and women, what they are talking about when they talk about girl power, and that maybe sometimes that needs to get redefined a little bit. One of the things that I have I've seen happen is that there is a lot of emphasis put on girls' looks rather than accomplishments, and how that bleeds over into having this power from what you look like, also as opposed to accomplishments. And I wondered if anybody out there had any thoughts maybe along those same lines, because I think what a lot of this initiative about is also girls taking on some of this, and this is hard to do.
Here you go.
I guess it's not so much what you look like as far as how pretty you are, but maybe feeling the pressure that if you're in a position of power to sort of resemble more masculine qualities than feminine qualities, that as far as what you look like. Like you look more stern, you don't look quite as, I guess, as feminine if you want to be in a position of power or, authoritative position.
That is such a fantastic observation, because one of the things that I always talk to younger people, and actually as I'm mentoring people as they're working through their career, is that it is profoundly important. This is not just for women, by the way. It is profoundly important for you to find your own voice and for you to use it. And so some people are more feminine, more masculine. Some people are more assertive. I think that there is an assumption that, a lot of people have role models, and they'll look at someone who they think has achieved something that they aspire to, and will then try to imitate that or copy that style. Actually, back in the early 80s, a lot of the women wore clothing that looked very much like men's clothing. In fact, even there was a blouse style that had sort of like this floppy bow tie. All the older women are like, oh yeah, remember those. And it was a version of a man's necktie is actually what it was. And it was, but I think it's not just the outward appearance, but it's also how people act. And I think that, you know, everyone has their own way of managing, their own way of interacting with people, and I think if that you can tap into what is genuinely yours, then one is it's more authentic, but two is I think that there is a breadth of what you bring to an organization. I like to make jokes, and I sometimes can be goofy. People sometimes seem surprised that I'm the president of PBS. I can't tell you how many dinners I've gone to where someone says, and the president of PBS is here, and the person will go to shake my husband's hand. But it's all right. He's always very proud. My husband is the biggest feminist that I know. But it is, in fact, but I think that, you know, women that feel like they have to be harder than men, or it's all messed up. You got to be yourself. And I think that as you find your own career path, actually, that also helps, because not everyone actually is cut out to be a CEO. It's hard. You're lonely. There isn't anybody else to blame. When something goes wrong, it's your fault. Now, when the good stuff happens, you can take the credit if you want, but I think if you run an organization, you know it's not you. It's, you know, I'm always happy to be the front man for PBS, but it's not me. It's all the wonderful people that I have the privilege to work alongside that do it. But it's a very specific kind of skill in order to run an organization. Other people are much happier doing other things. Some people are more happy doing operations. Some people are more happy doing creative work. Some people love managing people, and that's the thing that brings me the greatest joy in my life. Some people can't stand to deal with people, and you shouldn't have to if that's what you don't want to do. But you got to find that place. But certainly you've got to find that place of who you are and own it, and not pretend that you're something that you're not.
Thank you.
That was for the students.
Yes, please.
I'm loud. In talking about marketing towards the shows towards the younger kids, does PBS have any reach into products, like the dolls and the toys, and any influence in making sure that the toys that come with each show are gender neutral or empowering to both? Thank you.
You are loud, but you're not that loud, my friend.
I can get louder.
I know you can. I think that so some of the toys that are associated with our products are ones that we have more control of than others. But I think that what we try to accomplish in working with the producers of the programs that have the rights of those characters, it's in everyone's best interest that what gets developed out is consistent with the brand. And so I think there is and we do have a line of toys that we've developed, and we've put a lot of attention into making sure that they're gender neutral, because I think all those pieces, sort of come together. It's interesting with the Muppets, as just one example. I think, obviously Elmo is a male character, but I think, most people don't think of Elmo. And what is Big Bird? Big Bird is my favorite, because it's tall blonde. I mean, but he's me. He's goofy. He's a little klutzy. He sometimes puts his foot in his mouth. But at the end has really got a heart of gold. And I think that, although some of those characters are male and female, I think they're not as identified around specific gender characteristics, and I think that's also really interesting, too. All right, come on, more of you have questions. What do you want to talk about? You want to talk about the games?
Well, it's not actually just the games. It's two very specific areas in technology. 2014 was a very interesting year in technology. One, there have been a group of female developers and coders that have finally gotten fed up with the dearth of females in technology and have been really pushing for more females in technology and in coding and starting conferences. Girls Can Code, I think, is the name of one, and did phenomenally, and lots of other ones are following in its footsteps. And so it's really awesome to see that there's this encouragement. And I have not seen any backlash to that. Now, there's another side of technology in the gaming area. I'm not a gamer myself, but I follow technology and I'm in the technology world. And there was what has been termed Gamergate, where it started with a woman named Anita Sarkeesian, who runs a video blog called Feminist Frequency. And all she really did was go through some of the most popular games that are out there, like Grand Theft Auto and things like that, and just looked at, very sensibly looked at how women are portrayed. And it caused a massive uproar, and several other bloggers did the same thing. And Sarkeesian and her family, I believe, had to go seek shelter. Numerous death threats. I mean, terrified. They were terrified for their lives. And it really, as horrible as it was for them, in the long run, it was good because it started the conversation. Not only how women are portrayed in the gaming industry, how they're treated in the technology industry, also that we're pushing it under the rug, and that there needs to be conversation about this. There needs to be, a lot of the onus is on, well, game makers, just shouldn't make this stuff anymore. Well, really, no, people shouldn't buy this stuff anymore. And, with two small children who enjoy playing games, I don't want my son or daughter to see these so-called role models or anti-role models being portrayed. And, what can public television do if, to reach the young kids to say, and the older folks, that this is wrong. This is, first of all, it's inaccurate. This is not like real life. And if it is, real life needs to change badly.
Does anybody have any comment about that?
You?
I just have a quick comment about that in particular, because we have a boy and a girl. And I think I actually spend more time talking to my son about women than I do about my girl about being a strong woman, because she's got it already. Because I think, well, I'm who I am, but I think she's got a great dad too that does that as well. But I see these girls approaching my son, and who's a 5th grader, he's 11, and I see these very aggressive girls who don't dress appropriately or don't act like I think a girl that age should act. And I'm more scared for him. So I spend so much time with him with gaming and whatnot. And we have a saying in my house, and pardon me for saying this, but when we talk about what video games he wants to maybe start to play, I say, boobs, guns, and bad words. And those are the 3 things we look for. And he's got that. And he's not embarrassed to talk about it. He knows we don't see appropriate dress and all of that, certainly in his sister, certainly not on things he's watching. So he's very aware of that. And I just wanted to make the point about certainly protecting our girls and explaining to them and giving them the confidence and the power and the understanding of that, but also the boys, I suppose, because typically I have seen boys play more video games, if that's what we're talking about now. But my 2 cents about the boys versus girls part of it.
I think the boys' comment is an important one. I know when Abby Disney did her series, she was really as interested in her boys seeing the work that she was doing as reaching out to the girls. And we just, we've been doing this project called Makers, and it started out as a history of the women's movement. And, and it really has morphed into something really quite interesting. It was a partnership, it is a partnership with AOL. And the filmmaker, Dylan McGee, who is a force, had this idea of doing actually a documentary about Gloria Steinem. Gloria Steinem said no. She said, what you really should do is a documentary about the women's movement because it's never been done before. Well, Dylan didn't believe that. You know, it feels like, you know, had to have been documentaries about the women's movement. Well, when she went back and looked, she realized that Gloria was right. So we partnered with AOL. Dylan had reached out. She was trying to get the funds put together for this documentary. And in talking to Tim Armstrong, who runs AOL, they came up with this idea that rather than just do a documentary, they would actually do oral histories, and the oral histories would actually come before the documentary. And the whole idea was to capture not just famous women, but women who had really been groundbreaking in some way. And some of the choices that she made were quite controversial because she picked women who one would assume would be on a list like this. She picked women like Phyllis Shapley, who had a very specific point of view. And in this whole project began this archive which sits on, if you go to makers.org, go to pbs.org or go directly to makers.org, you can look at all of these oral histories. They're really great. But here's the interesting thing about this project. So she did the documentary of the women's movement. By the way, she ended up doing a documentary about Gloria Steinem for HBO. We won't talk about that. But anyway, she then did a series of films, of which you saw a few clips looking at women in space, women in politics, women in entertainment, women in business, women in comedy, and through that organizing principle, really then did a whole other series of interviews. And the oral histories have continued. What also has continued is a conversation on Twitter. So I follow Makers on Twitter. I probably get several tweets a day of just really interesting tweets and profiles of different women. But here's the other thing that's really neat. A lot of our stations around the country have taken this whole idea of Makers, and they have talked to both girls and boys about the possibility of recording oral. That happens to me all the time. And you know, sometimes when I'm speaking, it happens to me. And it's the worst thing in the world because people are all looking. It's like, whose phone is that? And it's like mine, you know, it's like, I don't want to know. But anyway, the thing is, with these oral histories, really inspiring girls, but boys as well, to capture the stories of mom, grandmom, the woman down the street, interesting stories about people's lives. Because I just shared a couple of my own personal stories, which may not be that significant, but it says a lot about how much our history has changed in a relatively short period of time. And if we can begin to put together these small archives, this station has done a lot in oral histories. I remember when we did the project on, Ken Burns' project on World War II, this station started this massive oral history project trying to archive people that had gone through World War II, talking about the experiences many times for the first time, I bet, in these oral histories, talking to women about their own experiences. They're telling stories that they hadn't told before. And by sharing that and sharing that base of knowledge, one, it creates a part of our history, but we learn from it, which I think is hugely and powerfully important. And so I think that, again, coming back to your whole point about girls and boys, I think that any discussion about the role of women has to really also continue, also has to include the role of men and really bringing girls and boys together into this conversation.
If I could add one thing, I'd love to also make a comment about what you said. I think about, one of my students and I just recently talked about what gender is science.
Mm-hmm.
And so listening to your comments, I also thought about today, one of our most popular television shows, not a PBS show, is about 4 scientists and they're all men, but they've got a woman in there. She's the dumb waitress, right? Who's very hypersexualized. And so we were really probably very glad for the introduction of the female scientist that came onto the show, although, of course, she, like the male scientist, is also socially inept. And so some of those messages that kids and adults are still receiving is for women to be great at science must mean that they're not attractive or they're socially inept. And so we see this. And you asked what PBS, the role that PBS has. One of the films that the initiative's done is they did this one, Women in Chemistry. And so it highlights all of these wonderful things that some leaders in chemistry have done, and they're all women. And so maybe some more portrayals like that would be really nice. And I think that's a lot of what this initiative is about.
Absolutely.
Is doing this awareness and getting it on a ground level and some educational tools. Right here in the middle. Thank you.
They're going to fight over you with the mic.
My name is Jay, and I want to thank you and PBS for Grover. Because I loved Super Grover growing up.
I know.
And I have a 12-year-old son who, instead of picking a boy character like Grover, was enthralled with Dora the Explorer.
Yeah.
And when Dora the Explorer first came out, there weren't a lot of Hispanic people in Central Arkansas. And we're getting more of them now. And my son wanted to learn Spanish and really wanted to go out and adventure. And whenever we went out to the pond or whatever, out into the woods, he always wanted to be Dora.
Wow.
And I was the map. So, yeah.
That's fantastic. That's a great story.
I hate to do this to folks,
there's
but
a guy right there.
Oh,
There's a
well,
lady right there.
let's hear you.
I just was wondering if there was any initiative to include trans women in this movement.
Yeah, we have done work on trans women, and as part of the overall initiative, certainly. I mean, we really are looking at, and one of the huge issues within public broadcasting writ large and all the documentaries is really to give voice to make sure that all people are seeing their stories reflected. So we've had powerful documentaries on transgender men and women as part of our larger work. And I have to go back and look at the titles of whether any of those titles were actually looped into this initiative, but certainly that's been a focus of some of the work that we've done. Thanks.
We might have time for maybe one more question, but I will tell you that this has been a great conversation. We'll take one more, and just because I'm likely to forget, there are some handouts in the back, so please pick one of those up too. Paula, would anybody like to have maybe one final question?
So I am curious as to what challenges you faced with the initiative and with getting people to view the power and the respect of women in these positions. We kind of mentioned before women being aggressive versus acting feminine of sorts. And also, even when women are in positions of authority or in positions of power, certainly a lot of times you have problems with men or even the public viewing them differently based on how they act. So what kinds of, I guess, challenges have you faced in airing and getting viewers and support for women in positions of authority and power?
I tell you, part of the reason that we really tried to do this initiative in the way that we did, and we also partnered with, and you saw a quick slide, organizations like the Girl Scouts and others, is that we were really interested in really trying to reach out to as many people as possible, and not just the people that we knew we would bring into the tent. And I think that what I think has really helped to get the word out is one that we have created, the sort of larger umbrella. We've done, we don't do these kinds of things for all of our programs because there's just a lot that we have on the air. And so giving some focus around this larger initiative that has lots of films within it has been great. But what has really helped and made the critical difference is social media. It's really been word of mouth. It's been people talking about, and you can see it sort of gathering steam. And with A Path Appears, Nick has a very large following already because of his other work in the New York Times and so forth. And so by using that platform and really talking about this work, he was able to, focus people and bring them into that particular film. And then hopefully through that, people have found others and it's really begun to mushroom. The other thing there was a very quick image of it in here, is that we've developed this, this video platform where a filmmaker or an organization can curate a screening online and people sign into it. So they're all watching in streaming form at the same time. The filmmaker or whoever's convening it can pause. People can comment in. And so it's like a virtual screening. And so we've done a lot of those. We've done a lot of screenings of the films from this project in communities and then had conversations afterwards. There's been a lot of work on college campuses around this project. So I think what we did is we did not assume that if we just put it out there, people would come. We really put a lot of attention into how we could get people to the films, because the other thing is these are really powerful and uplifting stories. I love storytelling. That's why I love this job. But I think that sometimes when people think about some of the work we do in public broadcasting, they think about spinach, or maybe in today's parlance, kale, and they just think they aren't going to like it as much. And the stories are amazingly powerful stories that really stick with you. And I think that has been really a great part of what has helped. But I think the social media word of mouth, so when you go out, take the flyers, talk to people about the programs that are coming up. And we've got great audiences. And what's really been great is for A Path Appears, again, it has trended on social media. The comments are just through the roof. So before we close out, I want to give one more plug to one other project, which is not part of Women and Girls Lead, but is a project from an extraordinarily talented filmmaker. And that is Rory Kennedy's film Last Days of Vietnam, which was created by us through American Experience, which is nominated for an Oscar. If you know any Oscar voters, tell them to vote for it. Which will air in April on public broadcasting. And it is a great and powerful story. Again, another story that I think has the power to convene really important conversations, as important in the Vietnamese community here, as many of the people who came here after the war are seeing their own story told in Last Days of Vietnam, as well as people who were in Saigon on those last days and what they have carried with them for the people that they were able to rescue and the people that got left behind. It is an enormously powerful film. So I feel very blessed to work in an industry with great filmmakers, and I feel very blessed to work in an industry with great and powerful women. And so for those of you who are thinking about potentially a career in media, I know there are opportunities at the station here. We also have internships at PBS, so just putting a bug in your ear if you're looking for something to do this summer. It's very competitive, but we look for the best, and if you're interested, and we're always looking for great talent. So, so with that.
A Path Appears airs tonight, doesn't it? Isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, it airs tonight. So if you're interested, tune in. Let's all thank Paula Kerger for a wonderful conversation. And I know we didn't get to everybody, so if you would love to, we'd love to have you at the reception. It is at the AETN Atrium, and we can perhaps finish this conversation right there. Thank you very much.
Thanks.